This episode will take a look at the swing states. Swing has a new meaning in 2020. It used to mean the state swings between voting Democrat or Republican from election to election. But in last November, they swung from red to blue after midnight, and often mysteriously. The states in question are Nevada, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. On this spreadsheet, we compare them with each other and with their own 2016 performances. Except Arizona and Georgia, they are all Democrat-controlled. But if you take a closer look, even Arizona and Georgia are in the hands of Republicans who behave in ways not that dissimilar to typical Democrats. They are the so-called rhinos, or Republicans in name only. These states also share another common characteristic in 2020. Citing the threat of the pandemic, their administrations all enforce massive mail-in voting practices like never before. But the logic may not be all that convincing, as tens of thousands or even millions still went to vote in person. Nonetheless, Nevada went the most extreme, joining another 8 states and the Special District of Columbia. It sent ballots to all registered voters unrequested, an unwelcome terminology to describe what's happening, which liberals refuse to accept, but I think is brutally honest, is that those are unsolicited ballots. The mailing lists they use are often littered with addresses not the most updated or accurate. While these states voted Republican in 2016, most of them at least, they all flipped blue this year. But when Trump supporters or even impartial observers or anyone who's not diehard Democratic fans watched the live updates on election night, we all saw weird things happen and cried foul. Now you look at these two charts, like Michigan, for example. At 6:31 a.m., a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in. Of that, 134,886 were all for Biden. That's 96% of the batch. And while Trump held a steady lead, a lead of more than 51% for most of the night, the whole advantage was erased more or less by that batch, and eventually he lost in a tight race. And look at Wisconsin. Something similar happened at 3:42 a.m. 143,379 votes came in one single entry, and that wiped out the Trump's lead of 51% for the whole night, and Trump eventually lost by less than 1%. Less than 1%. So we would say, okay, maybe this is the smoking gun, is it? So we have found something questionable. However, you have to calm down. The mainstream media are quick to fact check and debunk all accusations of fraud and irregularities. Take Wisconsin. Milwaukee is the largest county where more than 400,000 votes were cast. Also, it is an undisputed Democratic stronghold, and according to analysis, their voters lean on mail-ins. Reportedly, 170,000 were processed. Of these mail-ins were processed on election night. Now, this is how the story goes. Milwaukee, a heavily Democrat-leaning county, had more than 400,000 votes cast. And among those, a lot of them were mail-ins. And the Democrats, or the voters who voted Democrat, were all have a strong preference of mail-ins. So the total number of mail-ins, according to the reports, has been 170,000, as we said. And then they chose to process all the mail-ins in Milwaukee, centralized at one place, and they would do the tabulation and the whole processing in the middle of the night and finish it by around 3:30 and put one single entry to the live feed that we all see on the charts only after they have done all the counting of the mail-ins. So what we saw here was the whole 170,000 done, and then push one button and here you go, the whole thing updated. And because of this heavy concentration of Biden votes, 143,379 came out at the same time, and you saw the spike. Now that all was very well explained, and I believe that it was very much the truth. But then my question would be, why do you want to do everything like that? Is that a usual practice, that you centralize all the counting and then you update one single entry when the whole world was watching, and you artificially created such a spike that is so, at the surface, statistically very hard to explain? And it would take another place inside Wisconsin, the seat of the government, the capital of Wisconsin, Madison, is also very populous place, and it is inside Dane County. Okay, but for unexplained reasons, the counting and the tabulation and the processing of Madison was just normal. So by that I mean they would collect all the mail-ins, and then they would divide them into and send them back to the prisons and the wards where they belong, and then they would be counted during the night with the mail-in votes together, and they would be updated as the processing is done. So there would be no spike, and from Madison and other populous heavily Democrat-leaning place, every vote was coming out naturally. So why do you do it in such an odd and strange way in Milwaukee to create such a spike? Then people would look at and scratch their heads, right? So what really happened, the way that I see it, was that they deliberately created something that looked like fraud. That's one reason. So when you cry foul, when you try to investigate, they can very immediately debunk everything and fact check everything and shut you up. But there's another purpose as well that I'm going to explain further. Here you can see that as early as December 1st, the La Crosse Republican Party chair, William Feehan, actually filed to the federal court a lawsuit challenging the results. But then his case was thrown out by United States District Judge Pamela Pepper, who did not throw it out as usual on the merit or the lack of merit of the suit, but rather citing the reason that, humble enough, according to her words, the federal court does not have the jurisdiction or authority to grant such relief. Now we'll take a look at the complaint. According to point number 9, the design and features of the Dominion software do not permit a simple audit to review its misallocation, redistribution, or deletion of votes. First, the system's central accumulator does not include a protected real-time audit log that maintains the date and timestamps of all significant election events. Key components of the system utilize unprotected lots. Essentially, this allows an unauthorized user the opportunity to arbitrarily add, modify, or remove log entries, cause the machine to log election events that do not reflect actual voting tabulations, or more specifically, do not reflect the actual votes of or the will of the people. The complaint will show that Dominion violated physical security standards by connecting voting machines to the internet, allowing Dominion domestic third parties or hostile foreign actors to access the system and manipulate election results. To cover the tracks due to Dominion's unprotected log, accordingly, a thorough forensic examination of Dominion's machines and source code is required to document these instances of voting fraud, as well as Dominion's systematic violations of the Voting Rights Act record retention requirements through manipulation, alteration, destruction, and likely foreign exfiltration of voting records. Okay, now if you look at this here, everybody knows that Milwaukee is a stronghold of the Republicans. The Democrats. And you see the results of 2016 here. That Trump got 126,069 votes in 2016. Hillary Clinton got 288,822 votes. Now, things would not change dramatically. Even 4 years later, even that Biden is far less popular than Hillary Clinton. And there's nothing to sell with an old white male comparing to a first woman president of the United States, right? So the gimmick is not here. But because of the stronghold, because of the Democrat-leaning tradition, there would be no surprise that there would be still massive votes for Biden no matter what. And then they have encouraged people to do mail-ins, and they have sent out a lot of mail-in ballots. And then the Democrats, the voters for the Democrats would very likely be sending in their ballots by mail. So if they centralize the whole thing and process it in one center, using the Dominion machines for tabulation, and then the chances are they can create an unlimited supply of reserve that would come out at the time when it needed, the amount and a time where it is needed. And because it's connected to the internet, so they can actually do what we call an algorithmic predictive sort of calculation on the computer. So we saw the natural incoming votes of Trump counted during the night. They were all organic. They were all authentic vote in person that they would open and count and tabulate and record in a systematic way. So using the predictive software, they can find out when, if they have to jump in the middle of night, say 3:30, how many votes they need to overturn the result, or just about overturn the result. So that the connection with the internet is very important. So basically what happened was that this 170,000 votes that came in with more than 140,000 for Biden could not be all fabricated, but the fabricated amount of that could be easily calculated to fine-tune to do it just in time, just the right amount with not too much and would not look too suspicious. But if you challenge them afterwards and looking at this spike, they would say, oh, well, this were the whole night's counting of all the mail-in votes of the county of Milwaukee. So it has to be in the hundreds of thousands. So it looked very natural. Now what come out in the end for 2020 is that according to the reports, the official record, Biden got 317,270 votes, and Trump got 134,357 votes. Now you look at those numbers. This picture for Milwaukee is the same as nationwide, as we have gone through in the last few episodes. Trump had improved his own votes, even in a stronghold of the Democrats. Trump actually got more votes compared to 4 years ago, right? But for some reason, a very unpopular candidate who did not work hard campaigning, then he still got more votes than Hillary Clinton, because this was tampered with, not completely, but partially. So you have an increase of both candidates, which actually defies common sense. Lastly, let's look at another case. This is a case filed directly by the president himself, a lawsuit seeking to throw out the problematic mail-in and absentee ballots in the two big Democratic-leaning counties of Madison and Milwaukee over alleged irregularities. Unfortunately, his case, the president's case, was dismissed. The ruling of the Supreme Court of Wisconsin was not unanimous. It was 4-3. But then the ruling was not again, it was not on the merit or the lack of merit of the lawsuit. It was on technicalities and procedural issues. The majority of the Supreme Court ruled that Trump and his campaign waited too long to sue. But as we said, then this was not a unanimous decision of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Then who were the justices in dissent? There were two that were interviewed by the media. One of them was Justice Ziegler, and the other was Rogensack, right here. This is Justice Patience Rogensack, and the other was is Annette Ziegler, Justice Annette Ziegler. Okay. So what did they have to say? Rogensack blasted the ruling for cutting the case short when a significant portion of the public does not believe the election was conducted fairly. She pointed out evidence that the decision by Milwaukee's canvassing board to fix defective witness addresses on some ballots was based on erroneous advice that could lead to similar problems being repeated again and again. And she went on to remark, once again, 4 justices on this court cannot be bothered with addressing what the statutes require to assure that absentee ballots are lawfully cast. The electorate expects more of us, and we are capable, we means the court, are capable of providing it. And separately, Ziegler said the 4 justices whose ruling prevailed were playing a game of gotcha by claiming Trump and Pence had waited too long. The majority seems to create a new bright line rule that the candidates and voters are without recourse and without any notice should the court decide to later conjure up an artificial deadline, concluding that it prefers that something would have been done earlier. Ziegler wrote, that has never been the law, and it should not be today. Sadly, this is how things look now. Not very bright, as we can see. The law enforcement has been completely absent. The federal agents could have seized the evidence and investigated and probably caught someone if they really wanted to. The evidence basically is all over the place. And then we know that the courts, the various levels of the courts, decisions are arrived using a kind of a democratic system, if you will, like voting. We do have dissents. We do have 2 dissents in the United States Supreme Court of Alito and Thomas, right? And then here in Wisconsin, we do have 2 judges voicing their concerns. And if we have a kind of a decision of the majority which reflects this minority, then things could have gone very differently. But unfortunately, this is not the case. But still, we know that this is not a watertight court ruling based on merit. So this is how things are. And the more events are unfolded and the truth unfolded, I think the more of the United States public would feel upset and frustrated. But that in itself may not be a bad thing, because I think when the truth is out, and then it would be very problematic, I think, if you have a Biden administration for the next 4 years, and then people would rise up, hopefully peacefully, but in whatever way, to defend their freedom and to fight for justice. Well, thanks for watching, and that's all for today. Bye-bye.